Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Last time I did a live masterclass last month, it was a strange start to it because for some reason my audio just decided not to work. So just put like a little note in the chat box if you can hear me this time or if I'm just talking at myself again. We'll see. Yeah, hopefully you guys can. Yeah, I won't start anything until someone confirms that they can hear me, just in case, so I don't have to repeat. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry. It was just because last time I started the live and then I was just like talking for ages and then it turned out people couldn't hear me because for some reason the second I joined the audio just messed up. So yeah, thank you. I'm really glad that you said you can hear me. Um, Good. Yeah, so welcome to the third live masterclass. We try and do these every month roughly. They're usually on a Saturday or Sunday, so weekend, so that people can make them. And we started them in January actually. So we've been running this English learning platform called Scrbbly for I think since 2017. And it's just built, and we make lots of resources for English language and English literature for GCSE, IGCSE A level. And it felt quite impersonal in some ways because I record video lessons and we all make documents, and we weren't really connected to people so much that were using the platform. So we started making these so that we can get some feedback and meet you guys and connect a bit more in person. So yeah, so far the lives have gone really well. If you like this one, there's two others available that you're welcome to look through too. One of them is basic essay writing, so that's really related to this one. And the other one is poetic devices, so it's a bit more specific. Later on in the year, I'm going to start doing, actual text like Macbeth or something. But the first few, I kind of wanted them to be a lot more kind of freeform and general. So, yeah, in this class, I'm going to go through the principles of essays. I'm going to break down different types of essay question and how to approach those. I'm going to look a little bit at the difference between IGCSE and A level. And then I've also got loads of example paragraphs that we can look at from different people and different essays. So yeah, we'll see how much we get through in the hour. Just before we start, I was wondering, is there anything that anyone really wants me to cover as a topic, or anything you really want to know by the end of the lesson? So I'll try really hard to make sure that I cover that if there's anything urgent that you need or something really important that you're hoping to get from the lesson. So yeah, just pop any requests in the chat box. And then I should be able to share the first document. Hopefully this will work. See this one? Yeah, I think that's working. Yeah, so hopefully you can see this. So the main idea of this is just sort of an introduction to essay writing. I found personally with my school, they never taught us how to write an essay. They just expected that we know somehow, like magically. And most of the students that I teach now, because I'm a tutor as well, they just are very confused by what is an essay, or they half learn or they half know ideas. They don't fully understand. So it can feel really stressful because you spend loads of time revising your subject or learning your book, and you are just terrified of the exam, and you don't know when you get to the exam how you're going to do, because even if you understand the book or you know Shakespeare well, you don't really know how to put that into an essay or how to get a good grade in an exam. So yeah, this masterclass is kind of all about bridging that gap between the bit where you're scared to start the essay, or the bit where you're feeling confident in what you need to do for an exam. So yeah, they kind of ignored essays at my school. And so I kind of ignored them too because I was scared of them. I wasn't confident enough as a student to try and learn learn it by myself. So I just spent loads of time revising the text, and a lot of my time was not spent writing essays. I would really recommend that you do the opposite. So if you're scared of something in academics, like you're scared of the exam or you're scared of essay writing, that's actually a sign that you have to practice that more, which is annoying, but it will get you over your fear and it will make you a lot more confident. So if you're doing A level, I recommend practicing trying to do an essay a week. If you're doing GCSE, you don't need to do that much, but at least an essay, kind of ideally every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks to a month. So by the time you take your actual exam, you probably want to have practiced, I would say something like at least 4 or 5 essays before you take the exam in that subject and write the official exam essay. So yeah, essay writing is like a, a skill. It's a craft. So no one is magically perfect at essays from the beginning. No one can just write an essay. It might seem like some people are good at it, some people are bad at it. In reality, the people who are good at it, they have put a lot of work in, they keep practicing, and they learn over time how to improve and how to get better. So I have a lot of students that start with me and they're on like a D grade or kind of like a level 3, level 4 grade at GCSE. And by the time they take the exam, they're on a level 7, level 8, or even an A star at A level. And what we do is lots of essay practice. So a lot of people, I think, are actually quite intelligent and they're quite creative and they quite understand the stories and want to do well in the exam. And what lets them down is the actual essay writing. So yeah, really, really important to learn to write essays. Every time you do an English literature question, you're going to have to write an essay or part of an essay. So some literature questions, like IGCSE unseen poetry, you have to write a sort of basic essay. Some more complex questions, like comparative poetry, you have to might write a comparison of 2 different poems within the same essay. So lots of different techniques are required or approaches are required to the different forms of essays as well. So once you can do one essay and you understand it, at that point you need to branch out and understand how to do different essays in different ways. Oh yeah, my assistant said, yeah, just feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat, or that kind of thing if you need. So yeah, some people as well think they're more like kind of mathsy or sciencey, and then they struggle with essay writing. I would say to just be careful of that, because by the time you get to studying maths or science at the higher levels, you also have to write essays in those subjects. So yeah, even if you're doing engineering or further maths or something like that, eventually you have to write essays, you have to use analytical skills. So it's worth learning it quite early on to give yourself a bit more of a chance of doing well later when you do A level or university, masters, and so on. Yeah, what kind of things do you need for a grade 9? That is probably one of my most asked questions. So I'll be going through that in detail later on, like once we look at the example answers. So I've got quite a lot of example grade 9 answers or grade 8 answers. We can maybe have a look at the difference between the 8 and the 9 so that you can see what you're doing. And I'll give you lots of tips as well. So yeah, essentially grade 9, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be hitting everything in the top bands for the mark scheme. So the first thing I would say for a grade 9 is make sure you really understand the mark scheme super well. And every time you're writing, in the back of your head, you kind of have the mark scheme to mind. So you know what objective your sentence is showing from the mark scheme. Like I know if I write an essay, I'm showing AO2 or I'm showing AO3. So your brain kind of is aware of that, and it's aware of like the description of the top band, and it's sort of constantly ticking boxes that relate to that top band. So I used to be an examiner for AQA, and I would mark like maybe 350 AQA papers a year. It was very intense. They give you about 2 weeks to do it, and it's just insane. And I would say maybe 2 or 3 out of those 350 would be a grade 9. So it's like a very small percentage. You have to be very, very exceptional with your essay writing and your confidence with essays. So you know the text in detail first really well. Once you know the text in detail, practice the essay writing and look at the mark scheme. And that will give you the grade 9. And loads of example essays as well, because for me personally, when I did my GCSEs, I only started getting those really, really high levels when I looked at examples, because then it helped me understand what I was doing a bit wrong and how I could improve. Whereas before that, I was just writing and then writing again and then writing again. And I felt like I kind of just hit a level and I couldn't really get past that level. So yeah, use the examples to kind of pull your grade up and sort of improve your style and that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll have a look at some grade 9 examples later. So yeah, going more simply to the beginning, we have these requirements of an essay. It might sound really basic, but I've worked with so many students who are really, really good at essay writing, but they just don't do something out of these 3 levels, and they just drop their mark to like a C grade straight away or a D grade. So if you write an intro and 2 middle paragraphs, you don't manage your 3rd middle paragraph, that's going to just drop your mark really heavily. If you miss a conclusion, it will drop your mark a little bit. If you don't have a strong intro, you have to kind of think of the intro as like your first impression that the examiner is getting of you. So you have to make your intro powerful. If you've got a weak intro and you're better at the middle paragraphs, the impression that the examiner has of you has to be really like, changed throughout those middle paragraphs, which usually when we're marking exams, we have about 5 minutes to read your essay and mark it. It's really crazy because they don't pay you very much and they make you do a lot of papers very quickly. So yeah, if you make it easier for the examiner to read your work, mark your work, find the grades, find the examples of the skills really easily and clearly, and you're impressive from the beginning, from the intro, that will really, benefit your grade probably. Most examiners make an impression of a student and their level within the intro and the first paragraph. So especially the intro and first paragraph have to be really, really good. But don't miss the 3rd paragraph, don't miss the conclusion. So every essay, I'll just put it in the chat box as well so that it's really clear. So you have your intro. At the end of the intro is a thesis. So we might get on to talking about the thesis as well today, hopefully. So we've got intro, end of the intro is a thesis. You need 3 middle paragraphs. We call these PEE paragraphs, but if you just do 1 point, 1 quote, 1 explanation, that won't get you the highest grades. That will get you like a middle grade. So those PE paragraphs have to be really extended and developed. And then you need at least a 1 sentence conclusion, maybe 2, something like that, 2 to 3 sentences, depending on your exam. So yeah, get this completely drummed into your head and make it a sort of fundamental rule that you don't waver from this structure. If you miss your intro or conclusion, if you only do 2 PE paragraphs, even if they're really long, it's going to drop you a lot of marks. So yeah, really fundamental. So yeah, we'll have a look at what do we do? What is the intro? So you introduce your ideas on the question. You don't introduce the story. So you don't just tell the story. That's a way to actually not get a grade 9, is to tell the story too much. They're not really interested in you telling the story because they know the story already. What they're interested in is your ideas on the story. So most of the essay has to be about your ideas, your beliefs, your opinions, your interpretations. And a small bit, when relevant, is going to be you describing the story. But describe, which is when you're answering the question, what happens, is a low level skill. So you keep that to a minimum. You do have to describe sometimes what's going on to make a better point. So sometimes it's needed. I do describe in my essays, but I try and keep it really small. So when you tell the story, you describe what's going on. That's a low level skill. A high level skill that you want is analyze. So analyze is answering the questions how and why. How does this work? Why does it work? How does the writer communicate their ideas to the reader? Why did the writer do it this way? What is the writer's message or meaning behind the story? These are higher level skills. So yeah, as much as possible, your essay needs to analyze lots and describe very little. You could set up a debate in the introduction by looking at different angles. If you're aiming for really high levels, this is actually a very good way to achieve those. It does depend on your question a little bit, but yeah, most essays I write personally, I try and set up a debate by looking at different angles. I use something called a funnel shape structure for the introduction. So there's like loads of different options for how you structure your intro. For me, the funnel shape always works really well. So I start with a big overall idea in my first sentence. Then I might look at two smaller ideas that are a bit of a debate. And then I will put my thesis. So the thesis, probably if you feel a bit overwhelmed by essays and you're like, oh, there's so much to learn, the thesis is one of the most important things to learn. I would say learning how to do a point from the PEE structures and learning how to do the thesis are two of the most important things. So if you want to kind of narrow it down because you feel overwhelmed and you don't want to learn everything about essays, but you want to just focus on a few important things, thesis and points, I think, are important. Does anyone know what is a thesis, or have you heard of this word before? You can maybe try and explain it. They are quite hard to explain. It does kind of explain it here as well. Take a sip of my coffee while while I wait for any answers. If you've not heard of a thesis, you can tell me as well, because it is interesting to know kind of generally, like, if people are aware of this thing that you have to put in the intro. When I was at school, I never heard of a thesis. I didn't know what it was. Yeah, it seems like people don't quite know what this one is. So yeah, I'll wait. I'll kind of go a bit more in detail into the thesis then. So yeah, a thesis is actually the main point of your essay. It's the whole reason why you write an essay. So the word essay comes from French and it means essayer. Comes from French essayer and it means to try or trial out an idea. So the point of essays, or the tradition of essays, or where they even come from, is that you're supposed to learn a lot about a subject and then you develop your idea about it and then you present your idea in the form of an essay. So the thesis is your idea, basically. It's your main idea on the question. So if you have a question like, how does Priestley explore responsibility in an inspector calls. You've got how does a writer explore a theme in a text. Usually at GCSE at least, your questions are going to be sort of along those lines. They're going to contain a theme or a character. They're going to contain a reference to the writer and also a reference to the text itself. So you have to develop your opinion on that question. So you have to have an opinion about the text, an opinion about the writer, and an opinion about that theme or that topic of the question. So I might have a thesis then that is Priestley explores responsibility through the presentation of the inspector, who is a moral compass for the other characters. I might have another thesis, which is Priestley explores the theme of responsibility through exposing the issues of the upper classes and their lack of care for the lower classes. So I can have whatever opinion I want in my thesis, as long as I feel it's quite strong and it's quite valid. Developing a thesis takes time, so it's something that you want to practice a lot, read a lot about it, watch videos about how to do it, and make sure that you know how to do it if you're aiming for the high levels. If you're aiming for the mid levels, you can get away with just doing a more general intro without a thesis. But anything that's level 7 up to level 9, or if you're doing A level, then I would say thesis becomes really important. Good. Yeah, so we have a look at the middle paragraphs. So yeah, you have to do this PEE structure. And that means you have to do point evidence analysis or point evidence explanation. But however much people get taught this in schools, I find that sometimes it's actually hard to know what is a point or what is your evidence. So does anyone have any ideas on that? How do you write a point? Or can you give me an example of a point? I was actually doing this lesson with one of my students yesterday because she's really good at the analysis and the quotes, and she's awful at making a point, so she just skips it. But actually, if you skip making a point, your essay gets really bad structurally, it gets thrown off. So yeah, do any of you guys have a good explanation for how to do a point, or what is a point? Maybe you're already good at this and you can give some tips to everyone else. Getting info from the context, good. It's not actually, but it's also really good to sort of, if you ask questions where you're not sure, that's excellent, because then you can fix things in your knowledge and then you can improve your structure. So I actually, as a personal thing, I love making mistakes in my life or being wrong, because when I'm wrong, I can improve. If I'm right, I can't improve. So yeah, so context is actually really different from the point. Your point could actually be contextual though. So you can sometimes actually, yeah, make a point that has context connected to it. But yeah, the points usually, I would say, different from context. Summarize what you're going to argue in the paragraph using the words of the question. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that is, yeah, exactly what it is. So if you're not sure what this is, or you're not confident, which most people aren't, to be honest, it's quite a hard one. You want to look up how to write a point in a PE paragraph, or how to write a topic sentence, and get really confident on those. So the idea is that if you've made a good thesis in your intro, that has to be broken down into 3 different points or 3 different angles. So you take your overall idea from the intro, the inspector. What did I say earlier? I forgot my thesis. Priestley explores the theme of responsibility through the character of the inspector, who is a moral compass. So then I would explain 3 different ideas. Why is he a moral compass, or how is he a moral compass in different ways? So point 1 might be, he passes strong judgment on individuals who consider themselves superior. So, for example, Mr. Burling, Mrs. Burling. I'm using in spectacles because a lot of people study that, but it works for any text in any exam. So if you're not doing in spectacles, you can kind of see the structure still, hopefully. So you basically, break your thesis down into 3 different angles or 3 different topics, 3 different arguments, and each argument becomes its own paragraph, and each paragraph is not repeating or connecting to the other ones. So it's quite important that those 3 middle paragraphs are 3 very different ideas that don't repeat. So you're not repeating quotes, you're not repeating techniques, you're not repeating context points. Each one of those middle paragraphs is totally its own thing. Oh yeah, you've got another idea here. So I think about point in literature essay specifically as what the writer has achieved according to you. What idea, message, or theme has been effectively communicated? Yeah, that's a good way to think about it as well. So we always want to be thinking in literature about the writer's intention is so important. If you talk about the characters, I actually got told this when I was being trained to be a GCSE examiner for English literature AQA. They actually kind of gave us this training, and they said that higher level students know what the writer's intentions are, what the writer's trying to achieve. And lower level students don't know that. They just talk about the story as if it's real, and they kind of ignore the writer. So yeah, anywhere in your intro or your topic sentences, if you can sort of boost a description of like your knowledge of the writer, their message, their meaning, the point, the reason why they wrote, all of that will make your essay so much stronger. If you talk about the characters as if they're all made by the same writer for a reason, instead of them just being different people, that will also boost your grade a lot. So another tip for how to get those like level 7 to level 9s is loads and loads of writer's intention and audience effect. So yeah, writer's intentions are their sort of things that they meant to do with the story, like what is their message or their meaning. If you don't know that, I really recommend learning that before you write too many essays, because it makes a big difference. And then also the audience or reader response. So you're constantly zooming out into what is the writer's message, or how is the reader or audience responding. That will make you, a lot more focused on getting those higher levels. Another thing, actually, just to sort of related to that, is that this is more of a context point, but somewhere in your essay, I recommend that you do something called modern versus contemporary audience interpretation. So I'm just going to write that down because it's a bit of a mouthful. So yeah, look up how to do that. Make sure you can do that. It basically means you know how someone now would respond to this story, but also you know how the audience at the time would respond, and you know the difference between that, and you can comfortably talk about that in your essays. So like with Shakespeare, the way that people interpreted Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth is not the same back then as it is now. And a detailed awareness of that and an ability to confidently express that in essays will get you much higher marks. So you've slightly gone off topic with the point, so I'll go back to the point now. But yeah, really, really good ideas on points there. So this is how I think of the point. So I think of it as your own idea that answers the question. Your opinion or a perspective. It might not even be your personal opinion, it might be someone else's perspective on the topic. So really, an easy example is if you're doing a character-based question. I'm going to move from an in spectacles to something else random. Does anyone study a particular text they want me to talk about? Because I teach lots of text, so I probably know your text. If you're like, oh, I really need a few ideas on Jekyll and Hyde or Christmas Carol or purple hibiscus or whatever you guys study. If there's a specific thing you want me to use as examples, I'm happy to do that. For now, I'll just randomly switch to Macbeth because a lot of people like Macbeth. So yeah, so with Macbeth, say we've got a character question. How does uh, Shakespeare portray Lady Macbeth as a powerful woman? It's just a kind of random official question that came out a few years ago. We have this character, we have Lady Macbeth, we have this idea or theme or topic, powerful. We also have the idea of woman, so like, femininity, gender, we could think about. But the main thing we have is why has Shakespeare made this character? What is he doing? And so we break that into points. Each point becomes its own paragraph. So your middle paragraphs are made of those points. So I might say, Lady Macbeth is presented as a powerful woman through her influence over her husband. I might say Lady Macbeth is presented as a powerful woman because she embraces darkness and evil, and she allows evil powers to consume her, and that gives her power. So that's another point. I then might have a different perspective as well. So that perspective thing is another thing you can do for those like level 8, level 9 grades. So that's like a counter argument or looking at a different angle somewhere in the point. So I might say for my third one, if I'm trying to do a different perspective, however, Lady Macbeth's power is very temporary, and by the end of the play, she is entirely destroyed. So then it helps me springboard into the message or what the writer is like trying to do. So basically, the message behind that is that evil power is temporary and it's not sustainable, and it's not worth embracing evil or being evil in order to be powerful, because ultimately Lady Macbeth is destroyed by nightmares and madness and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's not worth being cruel over. She gets what she wants so temporarily that it's not worth the effort and the embracing of evil. So yeah, that's just a random example with a random character. You might get a question on theme instead of character. You might get a question on setting. Sometimes setting is more rare. I would still suggest revising setting, actually, just in case you get a setting question, but usually character or theme is what you get. Hopefully that helps, show you how to break it down, how to make those points. So overall topic split into 3 paragraphs. If you're confident, make one of those paragraphs a different perspective. Good. Yeah, so on top of that, the PEEs, if we do a PEE in a like straightforward way, like we just have our topic sentence, our point, then we have a piece of evidence, and then we have a sentence of explanation, that's going to get you maybe like a level 5 maximum. So a really good tip, if you're confident, you need to be confident with that PE structure first. So if you're at a level where you're like, that's enough, I need to just learn that first, by all means, just learn that until you're confident with it. If you're wanting to push further to like the grade B or the level 6 grade and above, you need to expand your PE structure. So how do we make the PEEs better? Does anyone have any ideas? Like, do you have any tips for what you personally do in your PEs? Someone mentioned context earlier, and context is actually really good for expanding PEs. But yeah, if you've got any tips or ways that you do it, ways to make your points better or your structure better, feel free to put tips in the chat box. While you're writing your personal tips, I'm going to go through a few of mine. I'm trying to think what I do. So I write my point. In the second sentence, I definitely put evidence. I try and make my evidence quite short and clear. Sometimes I'll have a longer quote if I want to go really in detail and zoom in a lot. But usually I'll try and do a shorter quote to start with. And then when I do my second E, the explanation, I'll try so hard to go as long as I can before I stop. So I'll keep zooming in, finding more techniques, going into more detail, thinking as deeply and complexly as I can about the effects of language, why the writer, um, was trying to achieve those particular effects. Once I've gone in as much detail with techniques and effects as I can, so that's AO2. Usually, this is for most mark schemes. So AO2 is usually techniques, effects, and meaning. AO3 is context, themes, and attitudes. If you're doing A level, the AO3 actually gets split up a bit further into like AO5 as well, and that kind of thing. So for GCSE, usually AO1 is your essay writing, and how well you know the text, your knowledge. AO2 is your techniques. AO3 is your context, themes, and attitudes. So yeah, for me, I just kind of expand my paragraph as much as I can, adding more techniques and effects on the same quote if I can. I don't add too many quotes, so it's really important, like maximum 3 quotes per paragraph. You need to use zoom ins to make your paragraph more advanced. Does anyone know what is a zoom in? I don't know if it's got a more official term, so if anyone knows like what the actual term for a zoom in is, let me know as well, because I just call it a zoom in, but I'm sure there's a better a better word for it. I'll maybe look at some examples of zoom ins in a minute. Not sure. Yeah, again, if you're not sure about how to do one of these things, it's great because you can learn and then you can make your paragraphs better. So I think there'll be some zoom ins in those examples that I'm going to look at in a minute. So I'll go more in detail with it. But basically, the idea of a zoom in is, say you did your point and then you did your evidence. The evidence might be like a quote that's 8 words long or something. If you want to keep analyzing in more and more detail, it can be really good to then re-quote from that evidence and pick a certain word and go more in depth with that. So instead of just analyzing that whole 8 words as a full quote all the time, you're then picking out individual words and looking in more detail at those. That creates a much higher level of analysis, so that will get you much better marks, basically. So yeah, we'll look at zoom ins and we'll look at like different ways to expand your paragraph in a second. So yeah, developments as well. I call them developments. They're just ways to make your paragraph better, I guess. You can do an alternative interpretation. So you could look, an easy alternative interpretation is if you find a double meaning in something, you can look at both meanings. A hard way to do an alternative interpretation is what I was talking about earlier, the modern versus contemporary audience. So how does someone now respond to the story? How did the reader or audience at the time respond? You can add more evidence and then more analysis of that evidence. So don't just do 1 quote per paragraph, 1 evidence per paragraph. Try and do probably 2. You might want to do 3 sometimes. So yeah, I have a rule that I do between 2 and 3, depending on how long it seems the paragraph is going to go on for. If I've got a lot to say about 2, I won't do the 3rd one. And finally, at the end of the paragraph, which sometimes people learn this as like peel paragraphs or petal paragraph structures. So you might have heard those at school. But yeah, at the end you do a link. So the link is you're going a little bit back to the question, or you're going back to your topic sentence. You're just basically trying to tie in the end of the paragraph to the beginning. That's actually really good for trying to get higher grades as well. If you have like a last sentence of your paragraph is connecting back up to the first, that always is considered good. Good. Yeah, so I think we've kind of understood. We've gone through in quite a lot of detail the intro and middle paragraphs. The conclusion I'm going to go through quickly because It's not the most important thing. No one really picks up that many marks in the conclusion. You mainly just summarize and condense your points down. So what I do is I read back over my essay. I use that to edit a little bit as well if I spelled something wrong or if I wanted to add in a word or cut out a word. I might edit a little bit. So go back over the essay. As you're reading and editing, find what you think are your most intelligent points. So the things that you're proud of, things that you think really answer the question, things that are like, interesting or personal. And then you boil all that down and you condense it to around 2 to 3 sentences, and that makes your conclusion. If you're really, really advanced, like you're doing A level or something, you could look at something called a thesis modification. So yeah, don't worry about that for GCSE. It won't really make any difference to your grade. If you're doing A level and you're really like trying for an A star, you can maybe look at thesis modification, which means you take what your thesis was in the intro, and after you've explored it, you adjust or refine it in the conclusion. When you get to university, you start to, that becomes important. But for GCSE, IGCSE, probably not needed. Good. So we've gone through the principles of essays and the structure of essays. Does anyone have any questions at this point before we look at some examples? Or are you all okay to move on? I'll give you like a minute if you've got any questions. Welcome to pop them in the chat box. I'm just going to get up my essay examples while you're writing. Yeah, everyone seems pretty good, I think. You guys mostly doing GCSE or IGCSE or A level? Just if you just pop kind of roughly like what level you're at in the chat box, that'll be useful because then I can look at examples that will help you. Like I don't need to do A level if no one's doing A level, for example. Oh yeah, good question about can you do more than 3 PEE paragraphs? So in an exam, it really depends on the format and the time frame. Oh, you're doing A level? Good. Yeah. Oh yeah, we've got a few questions actually, so I'll answer some of these before we go to the examples because I want you to do some of your own kind of like reading and figuring out the quality of these. So yeah, firstly with the 3 PE paragraphs, the standard, if there's more time, can you do more? You can do 4, and I always plan for 4, aim for 4. If I'm running out of time, I go down to 3. Never do less than 3, fewer than 3, and never do more than 4. So don't do 5 PE paragraphs because you get judged on the quality of the depth of your analysis. So if you've got loads of really good points, but each point is moving on too quickly, then you can't get depth of analysis, so you'll drop your marks. So you need to expand the same point as much as you can before you move to the next one. I completely did not realize this in my GCSE. So I had like one exam. I remember asking for like extra pages because I ran out of pages in my actual booklet that I was writing, and I was just writing loads and loads of paragraphs, like short paragraphs. And yeah, it was just a terrible idea. It was not a good idea. I still got a pretty good grade for it, but I would have got a much higher grade if I'd just done 3 or 4 really detailed paragraphs that were just really confident. Oh, cool. Yeah, we've got a couple of A level, IS A level. Good. So yeah, I'll show you 1 or 2 of the examples from that then as well. Yeah, so 3 to 4 PE paragraphs. No more than that. Try and make those paragraphs really good because it's a quality, not quantity thing. They don't want to see loads of writing. They want to see really good writing that's really nicely structured, that's really high quality. How do you make a quote bank with analysis too? I do that separately. So with my students for A level, I would say you do 40 to 50 quotes in a list, and each quote is like between 1 to 8 words roughly, occasionally longer than that. If you have quotes that are longer than 8 words, it's really hard to memorize them. So I just sort of suggest not to bother with anything that's longer than 8 words. Yeah, so you'll have a list of 40 to 50 quotes, 1 to 8 words each. And then separately, start kind of picking quotes at random and writing loads of analysis of them. You can then also start linking. So you can link to context, you can link to techniques, you link to the writer's intentions. So as well as doing analysis of that quote by itself, you then start making notes on how does this connect to your context. That's the really good revision technique for if you're not confident on doing a full essay, because you'll notice once you've done that, you can write the paragraphs of the essay so much quicker, and you actually know what you're going to say on those quotes, and you kind of know how they fit with the context. So it's really good essay practice to analyze your quotes, but keep your quote bank totally separate. And if you're doing GCSE, IGCSE, it's exactly the same rule, but not so many quotes. So GCSE, IGCSE, I would say, what do I say? Trying to remember. I think it's like 25 to 30 quotes per text. So this is like for one text. Again, 1 to 8 words each. And then, analysis separately. Depending on your exam for A level, you might need to add the critics in, or critical perspectives as well. So GCSE and IGCSE don't bother with critics, but the A level, that's one way that it's like more advanced. How do you revise effectively? Yeah, that's a good good question. Really hard question to answer, because everyone is their own person and their brains work in their own way. So if I tell you how I revise, it might not work for you. And if you just kind of look up like how do you do revision, that might not suit your brain. So you have to understand your character and your personality, what type of person you are, how you work. Like some people have very short attention spans, they work for 20 minutes and they need a break. Some people have really long attention spans, they can work for 3 hours, but then they might need a much bigger break. So neither of those is wrong or better or worse. It's just that people's brains work in different ways. So the best way to do revision is to try lots of different revising techniques or methods and find the ones that work for you. If you're quite a physical person, like an active person, things like flashcards can be good. Or remember for French A level, I was so worried that I wouldn't know all the vocab. I just got loads of post-it notes and stuck the French words for everything around my room. So I'd like the mirror was like mirror in French, or like the table was table in French, like with a sticker on it. So you can do kind of mad stuff like that. When I wanted to do quotes, I would stick them up on my wall for literature. So I'd print off quotes that I really want to get stuck in my head, and then I'd always just be kind of half looking at them when I was revising and sat at my desk. So those are good. The most effective A-level students I've ever had have made mind maps. So they make like a giant revision sort of document, or like pages and pages of revision notes. And then when they're condensing that down in the few months before the exam, so like around now, they get these kind of like A3 pages, put a theme or a character or something in the middle, and then do quotes off that, and then do context and critics off that. So organizing that way is a really good thing to do. I would say mind maps are good. My personal way I revise is I read. When I'm tired of reading, I listen. So I'll watch YouTube videos once I've like hit a point where I can't read anymore. And I make a lot of notes all the time because I'm scared I'll forget. So I just like constantly make loads of notes. then my notes end up really messy and kind of all over the place. So then I have another step where I try and organize those notes so that they're kind of clear. So yeah, that's my revision process myself. And I highlight stuff in a lot of different colors depending on what I'm doing. So the highlighting can help as well. But yeah, there's tons of ways to revise. So I would look up all the different ways, see which ones you think personally connect to you, and do them that way. And scheduling as well is really useful. Like I use Google Calendar to block out my weeks, and I know kind of how much I'm working, where I'm working. Because if you just like sat there all day being like, oh, I have to revise, it's really boring and tiring, and you don't really get that much done because you're just exhausted. So a lot of people can do, 2 hours of focused work, which is the same as like 5 hours of kind of scatty work. So you're better off just doing the 2 hours and then have 3 hours free. So yeah, it's a lot of different ways. How many quotes would it be for themes, characters, more or less? Anything else like setting you should get quotes for? Yeah, good point. Yeah, because your questions might be on theme, character, or setting. So definitely setting quotes are important. Character quotes important, theme quotes are important. I'd aim for a good spread across all of those. You'll notice though that most quotes relate to more than one thing at once. So one quote should cover maybe character and theme, or setting and theme, or some quotes will cover like multiple themes, like 2 or 3 themes. So yeah, you should find that the quotes you're choosing, if they're quite well selected, cover more than just one thing. They actually benefit you in multiple ways. Good. Yeah, so I'm going to give you guys, hopefully the chat box will allow this. I'm going to give you example paragraphs to look at. And we'll hopefully, I'll be able to give you like an example A-level paragraph versus an example GCSE paragraph as well. So we'll do the first one together. So I'll show you kind of what I want you to do. And then in your own time, you can kind of work on this. You can show me in the chat box if you feel confident what you've kind of figured out, but also feel free to just not show me if you're not confident yet. It's not really a problem. So I'm going to start with a more basic example just to kind of show you. So this is a level 6 or B grade. It's already a pretty good essay. I think this was the first essay that the student wrote for me on Romeo and Juliet, and by the end she was getting like A stars, like level 8s. So yeah, it's worth mentioning. You never want to just assume that you're a certain level, like, oh, I'm only going to get a 6 or I'm only going to get a 5, because if you keep working, you'd be really surprised at how much you can improve your level. And everyone starts at the lower levels, and then once you practice, you just keep trying to improve and get better. So yeah, I don't ever think of students as like a B grade student or an A grade student. I just think of everyone as capable of working towards those high levels, and it's more just a question of time and confidence. So yeah, this is a level 6. It's pretty decent. There's some stuff that could be better about it, and I'm going to give you all like A star grade examples in a second, but I'll show you with the slightly simpler one to start with what we're going to do. So I'm just reading this paragraph and I'm thinking, what is the point? What is the evidence? What is the explanation? How does it use techniques? How does it use context? So I'm trying to break down this paragraph into skills that it's showing. For this particular example, I'm going to highlight it to show you. You don't have to highlight your paragraph, but I just want you to think about it. So we've got a topic sentence, a point in the extract from Act 2, Scene 6. Shakespeare presents the beauty of love as short-lived joy that creates mountains of sorrow and anger. Really beautiful topic sentence. It's actually very poetic and sensitive. Mountains of sorrow and anger is really, really nice. And then the juxtaposition of beauty of love, short-lived joy, sorrow and anger is nicely balanced emotionally. So it's not a basic topic sentence. It's actually a really nice, like quite thoughtful, sensitive topic sentence. This is presented in the passionate quotation, "That one short minute gives me her sight." So we've got the evidence. The evidence could be better introduced because it's just the evidence here is just saying this is shown in the quote. Whereas if you're getting really good with the evidence, you actually describe the story a bit as you're giving the evidence. So when I give you those higher levels, you maybe see how they do that. But it's fine. It gives the evidence correctly. It's a nice, precise quotation. And the quote relates nicely to the point. So far, this paragraph is really well structured. Then we have a lot of techniques that are coming in, which is great. The adjective, short. This is an example of a zoom in, by the way. I think someone was saying they weren't sure about zoom ins. So we've got one short minute gives me her sight, and then we're zooming into this word short and looking at it more precisely. This is a really good thing to do in essays. Foreshadows how the love between Romeo and Juliet will not last long, and it will result in a tragic death. So yeah, we've got some analysis there. We've got loads of techniques happening through the analysis, which is really good. I tend to try and just throw in as many techniques as I can, loads of different techniques. You want to make sure that they're accurate as well. Be really confident on using them accurately. If you use them not so accurately, it will drop your grade. So yeah, just make sure you do revise techniques and you're used to them. This one's more kind of like evidence, I think. As said in the quotation, then love devouring death, do what he dare. So at this point, I would say it's losing grammatical focus. Until this point, it has the potential to be a level 7 or an A grade, possibly even higher. But this bit I just highlighted now it's kind of like losing the thread a little bit of what it's saying. It's introducing another quote quite quickly without slowing down and analyzing the first one more. And it's not really introducing those quotes in a way where it's telling the story. So it needs to tell the story a bit more and embed those quotes more. In addition, the quotation foreshadows, so another technique. It's a good tip to not repeat techniques. So if you've used foreshadowing once, use a different one here. How the bond of love between the rivaling families will result in death due to the unnatural aspect of them being together. Yeah, so that's really good. This relates to the society at the time where children were seen as property, who were seen as property were told to marry a stranger who was often a lot younger than them in exchange for property or wealth. So we've got some context coming in there as well. Put the context in a different color. The context is good, like it's in the right place structurally, it's connected to the point, it's also quite general. So another way for this to be a bit better is to make that context really precise and specific. What is the society at the time? Why were children viewed as property? Try and use, Elizabethan or Renaissance terminology. So if you use lots of terms and words from the time periods that you're analyzing, that's one way to really boost your context very highly. So yeah, basically I've just broken this down. I've broken it into point, evidence, explanation, and I've broken it into AO2 and AO3. And that's kind of what I want you guys to do now. It's training you how to look through student examples and kind of understand them in detail. So I'm going to give you is it an epithet? Yeah, it's a good question. Epithets are sort of like names that you give something. So yeah, in this case, we would call it an epithet. So you could maybe call it also a classical epithet. If I can write that down. Because it's kind of like, if you read like, ancient stories, like the Iliad or something, you end up with these kind of titles that people get, like, you know, Athena of the flashing eyes, or I can't remember, like something to do with Achilles, but they always have these like specific descriptions of something. So at this point, death is personified first as a being, as if it was a human, and then an epithet, love devouring, is added to death, and that's to make it sound more like the kind of ancient Greek or ancient Roman sort of epithet. So yeah, so I would actually kind of break this down into two techniques. I would call it, something got really sunny and I can't see anything. Come on. There, that's a bit better. Yeah, so death is a personification of a force or a kind of natural entity, which again is also classical. You find that a lot in ancient Roman or Greek times. A lot of Shakespeare is him trying to carry forward the tradition of ancient Rome and Greece. So understanding, like, you know, ancient Greek theatre really helps you understand Shakespeare a lot. So yeah, death is a personification, and then the epithet is the love devouring specifically. So yeah, it's a good point. If you're using a technique that you're not 100% sure on, do that in practice essays. In the real exam, make sure every technique you use you're 100% confident on, because if you slightly get it wrong, it could affect your grade. If you make one or two mistakes in an essay, it's fine, but if you have general errors, that will drop your mark. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I think maybe let's have a look at this one. So this is a level 9 GCSE Jekyll and Hyde, written by one of my students a few years ago. Hopefully is it too long? Oh no. Yeah, I don't know how to copy these to you guys. I might have to do it in like stages, I think. I've never copied such a long, big amount of words into a paragraph before, into a chat box. Okay, let's see if I'll try and do it in like a few chunks. No. Yeah, there's no way for me to kind of send you. Let's maybe go through two together then. We'll just have a look at this one first, and then we'll have a look at the A-level one. And you're really scared of the A-level, don't worry. But if you look at an A-level one, it will actually help you understand how to get those really top GCSE things as well, because basically what you're doing at A-level is you're pushing beyond the standard of GCSE. So level 9 at GCSE is like going into A-level quality. So yeah, possibly it'll be helpful. Yeah, so if I can maybe get this onto a single page that you guys can see, I'll give you a few minutes to kind of, yeah, so I want you to just break this down. I'm going to be quiet for a second, unheard of. I want you to think about the point. I want you to think about the evidence that's used. I want you to think about the analysis or the explanations. I want you to find techniques, or AO2, where it's talking about the meaning of language or the effects of language. And I want you to think about context, or AO3. I'll give you a few minutes to do this, maybe like 5 minutes to sort of read it, break it down, and then we'll switch to an A-level and do that for 5 minutes as well. if you've got questions while you're going through it, like you're really not sure if something's a technique or not, or you don't know if something's context or not, feel free to just pop that in the chat box as well. I can help you with it. Yeah, how do you know when to stop writing? I was very bad at that at GCSE, especially because I just kept adding points and adding more ideas, and just, I thought that if I showed all of the ideas that I had in my head, that would get me a good grade because I had lots of knowledge, but actually that's not true. So the thing that gets you the good grade is really good, clear structuring. And you just need a few points to show that you know it. You don't need to show every single piece of knowledge that you have. You don't need every possible quote that fits with your topic sentence. So that's partly why I say limit yourself to 2 to 3 quotes per paragraph, because if you do 4 quotes or 5 quotes, if you're analysing them all properly in detail, that's going to just start making the paragraphs way too long. If you're handwriting your paragraphs, a good rule of thumb is that you aim for paragraphs that are around kind of 3/4 to a page long. Half a page long is probably the shortest you could manage to do a good paragraph. So if you're thinking of like how long should it look on the page, that's roughly how long. For A level, definitely I would recommend trying to get to about a page long per paragraph, roughly. Another way to think about it is I try and limit my paragraphs to about 6 to 8 sentences, something like that. So this one is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that one's 8 sentences. I taught her well. And your whole essay. Well, if you think of your paragraphs at 8 sentences long, let's say they're about 3/4 of a page long. You need to do 3 of those. So 3 times 3/4 maths. Oh gosh, 2.5 pages-ish for your middle paragraphs. And then your intro and conclusion, as a general rule, should be about half the size of a middle paragraph. So maybe like, around 3 to 4 sentences long. You can get away with, like, if you're doing GCSE, 2 to 3 sentences long. I would say if you're doing A-level, about 3 to 4 sentences long. So that makes it around maybe 3 pages is what your essay should be on average. So minimum 2.5 pages, maximum maybe 4 pages, something like that if you're doing GCSE. So if you underwrite, like you're not writing enough, you can't pick up enough marks because they have to kind of see development and details to get those high levels. Like on the top bands on mark schemes are always about how well developed something is or how much detail someone's gone into. So if you underwrite and your ideas are too simple, they can't get those top grades. If you overwrite and you write too much, like I used to, that's also going to drop your grade because it's not nicely structured. So it's quite important to write a kind of middle amount. Good. So yeah, I think we're kind of like, we've had a bit of a time to have a look through this. I'm going to just go kind of through it really quickly with you guys. So we have the topic sentence here. The topic sentence should always be there, never put it anywhere else. That's your point, your first thing that you write, your first sentence of your middle paragraphs. It's important that those actually don't contain quotes, so never put quotes in your point because the quotes is evidence. That comes in the second one. It's actually got a technique in here though, which is okay. I don't always put techniques in my points, but occasionally I do. Don't make your point into a technique. Like your point has to be an opinion or idea. But if you use techniques to make that opinion or idea, that's fine. So if you're not sure about that, I wouldn't use techniques in the point. Just try and make the point a bit clearer. If you're confident enough, you can weave a technique into your point, especially if you're doing like A-level or something. So then we've got an introduction to the quote. So notice the difference between that one that we looked at for Romeo and Juliet and how it just said in the quotation and then gave the quote. This one has an introduction. It's describing the quote before it puts it in. That makes a much better essay style because it's embedded now within the description of what's happening. So that's an example of when you describe in an essay in a good way. You know, I was saying at the beginning, don't describe too much. When you do it like this is really nicely done. Yeah, so nice embedded quotes, nice clear evidence, not too long, not too much. Then we start analyzing straight away. A really good thing that she's doing here is she's using things like characterization, antagonist, which are form points for the AO2 straight away before she goes into language. Because if you're aiming for really high AO2, you need form and structure and language, not just language techniques. So if you can kind of just hit the ground running with some form or structure points and then go into language, that always is better. Yeah, so we've got antagonist, characterized, oxymoron. We've got some zoom-ins here, trampled and calmly. Double zoom-in is really good as well, really nice. There's a bit of a grammatical error there, placed alongside each other. It doesn't matter because the quality of the writing overall is fine. So if you spell something wrong, it's really not the end of the world as long as your quality is good overall. Auditory image, a different technique. The effects. So as well as putting the techniques in, understanding why they use them is the most important thing. If you do lots of techniques by itself, that's called feature spotting. You can look it up. Yeah, feature spotting is a bad thing. That's where you just try and throw loads of techniques into a paragraph without really understanding why they're used or what the point of them is. So avoid. Oh, Judith, I'll answer the handwriting question in a second. Sorry, I just saw that. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of context here. Making both modern and Victorian audiences. So there's a word missing. Again, it doesn't matter because the quality is really good. She did write this in time conditions, and when people are timing, when timing's involved, you're not going to get a perfect answer because people are in a rush and they panicked. So they're quite lenient with the exam marking that way. You can have a word missing and still get a level 9, and spell something wrong and get a level 9. A different quote here, so we're adding quote number 2. We are analyzing the form again, the characterization there with the word mannerisms. And then we're connecting halfway through that same sentence to context. So the context is what we call integrated. It's actually like woven into the arguments, not just like randomly thrown at the end of the paragraph. It's being used to reinforce the points that are made. So that's super important structurally if you're aiming for those top levels, especially at A level actually. Yeah, and then this one is kind of like a context / technique point at the same time because it's about the writer and also the technique of the math piece. So if you get really confident, you can do AO2 and AO3 together. Then we have that final summary sentence. So overall, the didactic story warns us not to be savage. Victorian society follows values and moral, and Victorian society to follow values and morals. So it's a nice little kind of ending with a little bit more context. So yeah, it's an excellent paragraph there, and yeah, she got a level 9 in her exam at the end of the year as well. Good. So hopefully you can see the difference between that Romeo and Juliet one, which is really good as a starting point, but there's ways you can make it better. This is like an example of like the best sort of standard you want to be aiming for at GCSE or IGCSE. We're going to go one step above this to A level, and we'll just kind of repeat the process with an A level. I have got more examples here. If anyone wants this example document, just email at the end of the lesson admin@scrbbly.com and we'll just send it to you because it's just on my computer. So yeah, if anybody actually wants this to look through all of the examples, because I'm only going to just do the A level one, I think. Yeah, I can send it to you. Let me see. This one's actually highlighted already because I did it with my student. Yeah, so we'll have a look at this one. I don't know if I can quite fit that one on the page. It's a comparative, so I'm going to actually just split this, ignore the fact that it's comparative because that's a bit more advanced. I'm going to just sort of split it into just on the Handmaid's Tale. See if that works. Yeah, so it does have some mentions of like Orwell and Winston, but we'll just have a look at it. Yeah, we'll have a look at it as a sort of straightforward, not comparative, because once you add in the comparative, it gets more complicated. So this might be ever so slightly kind of random to read because it might have light comparison in, so just ignore that. But it's a way of me getting it onto a page so that you can read the whole thing. So Atwood confronts her readers with rebellion and defiance that allows the reader to hope. Allows the character to find hope. I'm just going to make it a little bit simpler so that it makes a bit more sense. Yeah, so the context of this one, it's about Handmaid's Tale. Gilead is a fictional future world that is a dystopian society. So it's like the government has taken control over the people and they've changed people to kind of like all be behaving and acting in the best interests of their society. So there's characters that are kind of like forced into roles and no one has any freedom to do or be what they want. It's all about like preserving humanity in general. Yeah, so have a look at this one. This is just an example. So this student, I'm working with him at the moment. He's excellent, and I'm really expecting him to get an A star in his A level by the end. He's ever so slightly messy and scatty. So Rhea, the student who did the Jekyll and Hyde, she's like really good structurally. This one might have a little bit of structural kind of errors, but the quality of it is a really good, like A-level quality standard. His vocabulary is really good, and the precision with which he thinks about the language is really good. So yeah, again, I'll give you some time, and I want you to think about how does it use AO2 techniques, how does it form its point, how does it create context, so AO3 context. The other thing that I want you to think about with this one, if you're doing A-level, is it also includes critics. So it'll say so-and-so claims that or states that. If you're doing GCSE, don't worry about the critic. So that one is the critic there. I'll just kind of highlight that so that you know while you're looking through. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of time to just kind of read through this paragraph, try and break it down in your mind, try and compare it back to the Jekyll and Hyde and to the Romeo and Juliet. And see if you can find how it's analysing. While people are doing that, I'm going to just answer the question about the handwriting as well, because I just remembered. Sorry. So good handwriting and having to write so much in little time. They're contradictory things, aren't they, really? Because if you write really fast, you don't write that nicely, and if you write really nicely, it slows you down. So it's hard. Handwriting in itself is like a hard question to sort of figure out. For me personally, I do not, when I am an examiner and I'm marking people's work, I don't mind about handwriting, really. Like, as long as it's readable, it can be messy. I would rather someone is writing fast than someone is writing neatly and slowing themselves down. So the quality of your writing and your ideas is important. The quality of your handwriting is not so important. If it's so fast it's illegible, that's a problem. So don't make it so fast it's impossible to read, because you'll really annoy the examiner. They'll just be like so stressed that they can't read your writing and they're kind of squinting at the page. I've had a few essays that I've had to mark like that, and it just takes ages to get through them, and you kind of like lose track of the points they're making. It's much harder to mark an essay that's very messy. But yeah, I would say don't care too much about good handwriting. It's really not the biggest deal at all. And it's usually when I'm marking essays, if I see someone's writing like in a bit of a sort of scribbly, kind of messy way, that's a good thing, because it means their brain is working really fast and they're trying really hard and they've got so many ideas. They're sort of rushing to get all those ideas on the page. So super neat writing or really big writing is usually an indication that someone's less confident. Or they're thinking slower and they have not so many ideas. Don't fill your page with like huge writing. Sometimes people do that where they like make the letters take up the whole line. That's not. I've had a few like that, but they're not so great. Try and keep the handwriting to like your letters are kind of about half the size of the line, maybe just slightly under. The other thing about handwriting is I find when you really stress an exam, you just like push your hand into the page. I don't know if you do that, and it cramps your hand. And then you have to like shake your hand every 2 minutes, and it really hurts. So trying to train yourself to write lightly with as little pressure as possible, and using like a more expensive, comfortable pen that you can write with quite quickly without putting any pressure will massively help you, especially if you've got A-level exams where you're writing for like 3 hours or something. I remember with my A-levels, I was just like shaking my hand all the time. And just my hand was cramping up. So yeah, write lightly, use a nice pen, keep your writing kind of joined up and quite fast. As long as it's readable, it doesn't matter. And just practice timings loads as well. So figure out the timing for your exam, and then break that down into like, how long do I have to write a paragraph? And if it's 10 minutes, just practice like setting a timer, write a paragraph for 10 minutes, see how you did. Set another timer, write a paragraph. And eventually you get to a point where you can write those paragraphs within the time frame. Yeah, hopefully that helps with the handwriting. Yeah, I'll just give you guys like another minute or two to kind of think about this one. You'll notice the step up from GCSE as well. So if you're doing AS and you're thinking, why is AS so much harder than GCSE? You can see the quality. Like that GCSE one we looked at is like a perfect GCSE mark, but you can see how simple it is compared to this one. So yeah, I'll just kind of go through it quickly. I'm not going to highlight the whole of this one because I think we've gone through like highlighting twice, so you're getting used to that system. I use that system all the time with my students. I really recommend you do it with your own essays because it helps you see how much stuff you're getting in there and your distribution of your assessment objectives. So yeah, the main thing is the quality of this one is like more precise, more detailed. He's very, very good at terminology, so the vocabulary level is excellent here. Like disastrous optimism. Very short, precise quotations that are embedded seamlessly into the argument. This is considered really skillful if you're doing A-level. This is illustrated through managing to steal, quote, butter, which she puts in the shoes, and the quote, face cream from the commander. So he's describing the story and giving the quotes at the same time without sort of taking up any space or slowing down. So embedded quotes is really good for A-level. The concepts are more complicated. So the regime of Gilead controls the language, and that diffuses through different spheres of ordinary life. That those kinds of ideas, the concepts, the interpretations that you have at A-level are more advanced. They're more subtle and complex. There's references to like more advanced techniques, like biblical. That should really say biblical illusion, but like biblical ideology, biblical illusion. Semiotics, which is like the expression of meaning. This particular exam as well is worth bearing in mind in A-level. Not everything requires high AO2. So this one, the type of exam he's doing is a contextual critical. So it's meant to be really detailed on context, really detailed on critics, and very light on AO2. So you might notice the difference there. They're not just all equal like they would be at GCSE. Really important to know your mark scheme really well and understand like each question, what is the percentage of the objectives on the question. Yeah, he's just really great with his term satirization, also a high-level literary concept. If you're doing A-level, I really recommend actually reading something called a Dictionary of Literary Terms. I got one when I was doing my A-level, super useful. They just go through, in detail, like all these different literary concepts that you can then sort of start to reflect in your essays, and it really helps you. So yeah, hopefully that was useful for you. So yeah, we'll just kind of finish off, I think, with like a small any final comments, questions. Hopefully it's been useful for you guys, and yeah, let me know feedback as well. If there's anything I missed that you want to see in a future masterclass, please do tell us as well, because yeah, I'm always trying to kind of like be as useful as possible. So yeah, I'll just kind of wait a few minutes if you've got any final questions, comments, etc., and then we can wrap it up today. In terms of if you're interested more in our platform as well, you can go to scrbbly.com and it'll go through all the different courses that we have on there. There's a free basic essay writing course. I recommend just taking that because it's free anyway. And it goes through the concepts that I was talking about today, but in a lot more detail with like video lessons, documents, and so on. And then there's other ones on different texts and stuff if that's going to be useful for you, or random ones on like unseen poetry, poetic devices, etc. I think there's some kind of like 15% Easter sale until tomorrow if you're interested. But yeah, generally, I just hope that the lesson's been useful. You found it helpful. You learned some things, so you're feeling more confident on exams. Yeah, so if you guys don't have any further questions, it's been really lovely to meet you all. And yeah, thank you so much for playing along. And yeah, I hope you all do really nicely and really well in your upcoming exams. So thank you very much for participating, and I'll see you guys soon, hopefully, in some kind of future masterclass or lesson. Goodbye for now. Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad it was useful. Yeah, you're welcome. And yeah, good luck with everything. Bye.